June 23, 1942. A lone Focke-Wulf 190 fighter screams across the English Channel at wave-top height. The pilot isn't running from a dogfight. He's not damaged. He's flying one of Nazi Germany's most advanced fighters directly into enemy hands, and he doesn't even realize it. Within hours, British engineers would be swarming over technology the Luftwaffe had protected for nearly a year. Within weeks, Allied pilots would know every weakness of the plane that had been slaughtering them in the skies over Europe. And within months, the balance of air power would shift in ways that Berlin couldn't have imagined. This is the story of how one confused pilot handed the Allies their greatest intelligence coup of the air war, and how a single airplane changed the fate of thousands. To understand what happened that summer morning, you need to know what the Focke-Wulf 190 meant to the war effort in 1942. When the FW-190 first appeared over France in August and September 1941, it was a shock. RAF pilots flying Spitfire MKVs, the best fighter Britain had, suddenly found themselves outclassed. The German fighter was faster, climbed better, rolled quicker, and hit harder. According to combat reports from that first autumn, the kill ratio swung dramatically toward the Luftwaffe almost overnight. The British knew they were in trouble. Intelligence reports described the new fighter, but they couldn't get their hands on one. German pilots protected their machines religiously. Damaged planes were destroyed rather than abandoned. Shot-down aircraft were quickly recovered by Wehrmacht ground crews. For nearly a year, the Allies fought an enemy they couldn't fully understand. The Focke-Wulf's radial engine was revolutionary. Unlike the inline engines in Spitfires and Messerschmitts, the BMW 801 radial could take punishment and keep running. The wide landing gear made it stable on rough forward airfields. The firepower, 2 machine guns and 4 20mm cannons, could shred a bomber in seconds. But the real advantage was in the details. The engineering, the control systems, the little innovations that gave Luftwaffe pilots an edge in every engagement. Allied engineers needed to see inside one. They needed to understand the fuel injection system, the supercharger design, the control linkages. They needed to fly one. But as 1941 turned to 1942, capturing an intact FW-190 seemed impossible. Oberleutnant Armin Faber was not a rookie. Flying with Jagdgeschwader II, one of the Luftwaffe's elite fighter wings stationed at Morlaix in Brittany, he was an experienced pilot who'd flown combat missions over France and the Channel. He knew the airspace. He knew the risks. On the morning of June 23rd, his unit was scrambled to intercept RAF fighters during Operation Circus 204, a sweep over northern France. Standard procedure. JG2 had done it dozens of times. But this mission went wrong fast. During the engagement, Faber became separated from his formation. The radio chatter was chaotic. Multiple dogfights spread across miles of sky. Faber found himself alone, disoriented after the combat. He'd been in a turning fight. His fuel was fine. His aircraft was undamaged. He just needed to get his bearings and head back to base. Here's where the fatal error happened. Faber had been flying north during the fight, chasing RAF aircraft back toward England. When he tried to orient himself, he saw a coastline. He turned and followed it, assuming he was heading back south to Brittany along the French coast. But he'd crossed the Channel during the engagement. The coastline he was following was actually the northern shore of the Bristol Channel in Wales. He was flying deeper into Britain with every passing minute. He saw an airfield below. Grass runway. Looks right, he probably thought. He'd been flying over occupied France for months. The coastlines, the fields, the bases, they all started to look similar from altitude. Armin Faber lowered his landing gear and made his approach. The RAF personnel at Pembrey airfield in South Wales couldn't believe what they were seeing. A Focke-Wulf 190, the most feared fighter in the Luftwaffe, was in the landing pattern. Gear down, flaps extended, coming in like it owned the place. According to reports from the airfield that day, there was a moment of stunned silence. Then someone started running. Sergeant Jeffries, who was on duty, grabbed a very pistol, a flare gun used for signaling. Other personnel scrambled for positions, because there were two possibilities. Either this was an attack, or this was the intelligence windfall of the war. Faber touched down smoothly. He taxied off the runway, and then he saw the RAF roundels on the aircraft parked nearby. The realization must have hit him like a physical blow. He'd crossed the channel and confused the Bristol Channel for the coast of Brittany. He'd just landed Germany's most secret fighter at an RAF base. He immediately tried to destroy the aircraft. Faber pulled out his own flare pistol and attempted to set fire to the plane. But before he could ignite the fuel, Sergeant Jeffries sprinted across the field and jumped onto the wing. According to the account, Jeffries aimed his flare gun directly at Faber through the canopy. The message was clear: step out or burn with it. Faber surrendered. The most intact enemy fighter captured by the Allies, to that point in the war, was sitting undamaged on British soil. The Air Ministry moved fast. Within hours, the FW-190 was secured. Engineers from the Royal Aircraft Establishment at Farnborough arrived within a day. The aircraft, now designated MP-499 in RAF service, was photographed from every angle. Every panel, every rivet, every marking was documented before anyone touched a single component. Then they started disassembling it. What they found was remarkable. The German engineering was, in many ways, more sophisticated than anything flying in the RAF. The fuel injection system meant the engine didn't cut out during negative G maneuvers, a problem that plagued British fighters. The wide-track landing gear was brilliantly simple. The cockpit layout was logical, efficient, almost ergonomic by 1942 standards. But they also found weaknesses. The control system had a quirk. At high speeds, the ailerons became heavy, difficult to move. British test pilots discovered they could outturn the FW-190 in certain situations by forcing prolonged rolling fights. The engine, while powerful, had specific altitude bands where it struggled. The armor protection, while good, had gaps, and the fuel system, so advanced in some ways, had vulnerabilities that could be exploited in combat. Wing Commander H.J. Willie Wilson led the test flying program, pushing the captured aircraft to its limits. He documented every characteristic, every handling quirk, every advantage and disadvantage. The RAF's test pilots flew it repeatedly, understanding not just the machine, but how Luftwaffe pilots were thinking, how they were using this airplane's strengths in combat. The intelligence from Faber's aircraft went out immediately to operational squadrons. Tactical bulletins explained exactly how to fight the FW-190, where it was vulnerable, what maneuvers worked, when to engage, and when to break off. Pilots who'd been dying at a brutal rate suddenly had a fighting chance. But the impact went beyond tactics. British aircraft designers used what they learned to improve the Spitfire. The Mk9, which was already in development, got refinements based on understanding what made the German fighters so effective. American engineers studied the reports when designing tactics for the P-47 Thunderbolt and P-51 Mustang. The captured FW-190 influenced aircraft development and combat doctrine for the rest of the war. German intelligence eventually figured out what happened. Luftwaffe pilots were briefed to be more careful with navigation. Security around downed aircraft became even tighter. But the damage was done. You can't unring that bell. The Allies had flown, tested, and dissected their enemy's best fighter, and that knowledge spread through every combat squadron from England to North Africa. Some historians argue the intelligence from Faber's aircraft saved hundreds of Allied pilots. Others say it shortened the battle for air superiority over Europe by months. The exact numbers are impossible to calculate, but the strategic value was enormous. One airplane, one navigation error, one confused pilot. Armin Faber spent time in a POW camp in Canada. According to records, he attempted to escape twice, but Faber had a plan to get home that didn't involve tunnels or wire cutting. He faked epileptic seizures convincingly enough that in 1944 he was repatriated to Germany on medical grounds. The illness was fake. Within a short time after returning home, Faber was back in the cockpit, flying frontline fighter operations again. The man who'd handed the Allies one of their greatest intelligence coups returned to combat, a fact that must have infuriated British intelligence when they learned about it. After the war, Faber's story took an interesting turn. In 1991, nearly 50 years after his navigation error, he visited the Shoreham Aircraft Museum in England, the same country where he'd accidentally landed in 1942. He donated his pilot's dagger and badge to the museum. It was, in its own way, an acknowledgement of what had happened that June day. Details about the rest of his life remain scarce. He returned to Germany after the war and, according to most sources, died sometime around the year 2000. Whether he ever fully came to terms with being the man who gave away the Focke-Wulf 190, we'll never know. The aircraft itself, work number 313, designated MP-499 by the RAF, had a short life after capture. The British tested it extensively throughout 1942 and into 1943, extracting every piece of intelligence they could. But by September 1943, it had served its purpose. The aircraft was scrapped. Today, only fragments remain. The windscreen and control panel from Faber's FW-190 are preserved at the Shoreham Aircraft Museum, the same museum where Faber donated his personal items in 1991. You can see them there, tangible pieces of one of the war's strangest intelligence coups. Other Focke-Wulf 190s are displayed in museums around the world, including at the RAF Museum at Cosford. But Faber's specific aircraft, the one that changed the air war, exists only in pieces and photographs. Here's what gets me about this story. Wars are often decided by the big things. The massive battles, the brilliant strategies, the new technologies deployed by the thousands. But sometimes it's the small moments. One pilot, one mistake, one airplane landing at the wrong airfield on a summer morning in 1942. The Focke-Wulf 190 that Armin Faber delivered to the RAF didn't end the war, but it changed the calculations. It gave Allied pilots knowledge they desperately needed. It influenced aircraft design and tactical doctrine for years, all because an experienced German pilot got turned around during a dogfight over the English Channel. Which makes you wonder, how many other small moments like this shaped history? How many intelligence coups? How many captured secrets? How many accidents changed the course of wars in ways we'll never fully document? If you found this story fascinating, let me know in the comments. What other accidental moments in military history would you want to hear about? And if you want more deep dives into the forgotten stories of World War II, hit that subscribe button. These stories deserve to be remembered.